Over the years, I've heard players complain about just about everything in Hunt. And after 6,000 hours, trust me, I've heard it all. From camping is killing Hunt to the meta has ruined the game. If it's been posted to Reddit as a complaint, I've probably heard it, seen it, or experienced it myself. And everything in between. But what if none of these are actually the problem? What if they're symptoms of a much larger issue that's plaguing Hunt? Because I think Hunt has a problem that goes deeper than camping, spam, burn, or the meta. I think Hunt is slowly losing the identity that made people fall in love with it. The game has always presented itself as a harsh, unforgiving extraction shooter where the resources matter, information's valuable, and the decisions you make can come back to punish you. But over time, more and more of these things have become less important. I think that's where a lot of the frustration we're seeing actually comes from. It's not that camping suddenly became bad or that spam is now suddenly bad. It's not even that the meta suddenly became bad. It's that the game is increasingly incentivizing players to play in ways that go against what Hunt made Hunt in the first place. And that's what I want to talk about. Now, before you grab your pitchforks and torches, let me explain. Hunt of Days Past had a different vibe altogether. Players would run around the map gathering clues, getting to the bounty lair, banishing the boss, and fighting over the bounty token. But here's a question I don't think we all stop to ask. Why was anyone willingly going out of their way to tell the entire lobby where they were? See, because once you banished a boss or picked up that bounty token, you did exactly that. Everyone knew where you were. You were putting a giant target on your back, and yet people still did it. Why? It's simple. The reward outweighed the risk. See, back then, the only way to gain Darkside boost was by possessing a bounty token that made bounty valuable. It wasn't just something you extracted with. It wasn't just something that gave you money or XP. It gave you a powerful advantage. You were putting a giant target on your back, but you were getting something meaningful in return. And that's important because good game design doesn't necessarily remove the risk. It gives you a reason to take that risk. Now, fast forward to the current state of Hunt. And we have multiple ways of obtaining information on other hunters. From traits, consumes, event mechanics, pledges, and various other systems, there are now plenty of ways to gather information about the people you're fighting or those around you. And some of these can provide information that competes with, or in certain situations, is arguably better than the information you would get from simply carrying the bounty token. So why would a player willingly put that giant target on their back? Especially when there are other options that provide similar, if not better value, without marking you for the rest of the match. If you're playing to win, the answer is pretty obvious. You wouldn't. And I think this leads into what I believe are the symptoms of a much larger problem. Let's start with camping. Camping has always existed in Hunt, and honestly, camping isn't going to go away anytime soon. Camping is a staple of every shooter, especially extraction shooters. If you know your opponent has to come to a certain location, waiting for them there gives you a massive advantage. You know they're coming, they don't know you're there. That's good positioning. The problem isn't that camping exists, the problem is why are we seeing more of it? I believe one of the biggest reasons is another symptom of Hunt's current design, the new loadout system. With the rework to Hunt's loadout system, Quartermaster has become basically useless in its previous role. You can now bring a pocket shotgun along with a wide variety of carbines or other weapons without needing the same investment that you used to need. And it's pretty easy to understand why players are taking advantage of this. If I know you have a shotgun, I don't necessarily want to push your building or your compound. And if you know I have a rifle, you don't necessarily want to walk out into the open or peek that window because I'm going to click on your head. So what happens? Well, the shotgun player sits inside, the rifle player sits outside, and they both wait for the other to push or peek, and neither side really makes the first move. It creates a self-feeding cycle where both parties end up on Reddit complaining about how nobody's pushing and everybody's camping. But one of the more traditional counters to the close-range defensive plays was using the flash bomb, but since it's change and rework, it doesn't hold the same level of viability that it once did. So now we're left in a situation where the safest plays often don't push, wait, hold the angle, and let the other guy make the first mistake. And that's where the camping problem sort of comes from. It's not that hunt players have suddenly decided they all like sitting in bushes, it's that the game is rewarding them for doing this. Now, let's move on to the other half of the loadout coin, the spam. The new loadout system has opened the door to some pretty ridiculous levels of consumable spam. I've personally used the new system to get 8 beetles across the trio for a total of 24 on one team. And yes, my trio has absolutely bombarded entire servers with beetles. We've wiped entire lobbies of 6 stars doing this. Now, I'm not going to be the first one to sit here and pretend to tell you that this is the necessary and optimal strategy every single game. No, the fact that the game allows you to do this is part of the problem. And I think a simple solution here could help. Just put a hard limit on in-raid inventory. We already have a limit on what we can bring into the raid. You have 4 consumable slots. You can bring 4 of the same consume. 4 placeables, 4 throwables, 4 cards, 4 shots. So why shouldn't that limitation continue to matter once we're in the raid? A hard limit on how many of a particular consume we can carry in raid would immediately cut down on some of the ridiculous spam we're seeing. It wouldn't eliminate it entirely, and I don't think it should. But when it comes to consumes and weapons and hunt, I do think there are basically 2 schools of thought. You have precision and efficiency, your Mosins, Labels, frag bombs, and Hellfires. And then you have your volume and rate of fire, your Officer and Bornheims, the Hive bombs, the Dynamite bundles. And that's fine. As annoying as spam can be, I don't necessarily consider it a core problem, because at the end of the day, you click on the head, the problem's solved. The issue is when the game allows players to stockpile these absurd amounts of a single mechanic or tool, and then repeatedly throw it at other players with little to no downside. So I think the system needs some limits, but overall is okay. Now, let's talk about one of the more frustrating mechanics in Hunt right now. Burn. I'll be completely honest, I find burn incredibly annoying, and that's saying something because I absolutely love setting enemy hunters on fire, both near and far. I think it's hilarious that I could just cause people to spontaneously combust, and more than often, they don't know where it came from. But even I think the current availability of burn has gotten out of hand. Historically, burning a downed hunter generally required a dedicated burn tool. You had to bring your own Molotov, or you had to go find a lantern. These were meaningful resources that took time, or a consumable slot. Today, however, you have a huge variety of ways to start a fire. Flares, fusees, dragon's breath, alert trap, star shell, fire beetles, you name it. If it starts a fire, you could burn out a hunter. And I'm not necessarily against any of these things being able to start a burn, but what I don't like is that these tools have made the distinction between starting a fire and fully burning out a hunter far less meaningful. Here's a change that flares, fusees, dragon's breath, alert trips, and similar tools could start a burn, yes. But they would only burn the initial bar they ignited. Once that bar was gone, the burn stops, and you have a decision to make. You can either use another one of those resources to reignite another bar, or go find a dedicated burning tool. If you wanted to completely burn out a downed hunter and not worry about it, you need to bring a dedicated burning tool like a Molotov or finding a lantern. It creates an actual resource decision. Do I want to bring a Molotov? Do I want to risk going into the compound to find a lantern? Or do I want to use the flare to temporarily burn another bar and try and force the team to react? This creates a counterplay, and more importantly, it gives the downed player's teammates a chance to make a comeback play. Because right now, one of the most common plays after someone getting downed is burn the body, sit in the bush, watch them burn. That's not particularly interesting gameplay or fun for either side. If burn required a little more commitment, suddenly chokes become more meaningful. You're actually making a strategic decision, and it makes the mechanic healthier. Now, finally, we've gotten to the big one, the meta. Over the years, everybody has talked about the meta in Hunt. Meta this, meta that. You hear it constantly. But here's the thing. Every game has a meta. A meta is simply the most effective and cost-effective way to accomplish a particular goal. Players will naturally gravitate towards whatever gives them the best chance of succeeding. That's not a player problem, it's human nature. It's what we do. The problem is when the system that was implemented that's supposed to increase variety actually does the opposite. The initial loadout changes were intended to shake up the meta. The goal was to create more variety. But what do I see? dualies and pocket shotguns everywhere. Every player has has dualies, or they have a pocket shotgun. One or the other, sometimes both. So instead of having more variety, we've simply shifted what the dominant loadout is. I think Quartermaster needs to matter again to fix this. For example, a short shotgun paired with a carbine should require Quartermaster. I think short shotguns should have a minimum of 3 slot size. Their spread, damage fall off could be made more aggressive to clearly distinguish them from their full-length counterparts, but that's an argument for a different day. Because right now, the distinction between weapon slot categories is kind of muddled. The reason this matters is simple. Quartermaster used to open up interesting loadout possibilities. You can make unique combinations. You could build around bringing in an aftermath or a nitro before the loadout changes. You could sacrifice weapon capacity in exchange for flexibility. Now, it feels like Quartermaster's primary purpose has been reduced to, I want a pistol with my 5-slot weapon. Instead of getting a meaningful increase in build variety, we've essentially created a system where certain combinations are just freely available. So either Quartermaster needs a serious rework, or the entire loadout system needs a second look. Because right now, I don't think the weapon system is accomplishing what it was intended to accomplish. I don't think Hunt has 4 completely separate problems. I think these are symptoms of the same problem. The camping, the spam, the burn, the meta, they're all being influenced by the incentives the game gives players. And players are going to do whatever gives them the best chance to win. So what's actually wrong with Hunt? Let's start with Bounty. You have an objective-based extraction shooter where the main objective is arguably the most optional thing in the game. And for a lot of players, it can feel like you get more from wiping the lobby than you do from taking Bounty and leaving. Whether that's actually true in every situation isn't really the point. The important side of this is that the incentive to take Bounty doesn't always feel strong enough to justify the risk. One of the reasons players are willing to sit around the Bounty layer rather than immediately banishing it and taking the token is obvious. Taking the Bounty gives away your position. It tells the entire lobby, come kill me, I'm over here. Where they could have just waited for another team to roll up and get the drop on them. And in an extraction shooter, information's king. The team with the most information usually has the advantage and typically wins the fight. So if I'm going to voluntarily tell the lobby where I am exactly, the reward needs to be worth that risk. Darksight boost alone isn't valuable enough anymore when there are so many other ways to gather the same information or better information without painting a giant target on my back. So let's make bounty tokens game-changing again. For example, let's say you banish the Butcher. The first team to pick up that bounty token receives a unique effect. Maybe all incendiary damage is reduced by half, or you can't be set on fire while holding the token. That effect applies to your entire team. But here's the important part. It only belongs to the first team that picks up the bounty. If you drop it, the effect is gone. Now suddenly, the first team to banish and grab the token has a real strategic value and advantage. You aren't just getting Darksight. You're getting an actual advantage that fundamentally changes how you and your team approach the fights moving forward. And the goal is simple. Make the bounty worth fighting for. Give players a reason to take the risk. This brings me to what I think the biggest problem of all is. Look at any Hunt cinematic trailer. Really look at it. You see a world that's harsh, dangerous, desperate, resources are scarce, decisions matter. People aren't just fighting other hunters, they're fighting the environment itself. Everything there is trying to kill them. And then you load into the actual game, and where did all of that go? Hunt of today, ammo is abundant, healing is abundant, resupplies are abundant. You have multiple ways of restoring your bars in raid. The environment itself is more annoying than it is deadly. A lot of the decisions that used to create tension just don't carry the same weight anymore. Hunt used to have these consequences. Medkits had a certain number of uses. Ammo boxes had a certain number of uses. You had to pick who got a heal and who got ammo, who had to go without. You had to decide all of these things. And these decisions might sound small or insignificant, but they matter because they created scarcity. Scarcity creates decisions, and decisions create tension. These decisions and choices gave the game its harsh identity. It wasn't just about fighting other hunters. It was about managing your resources, deciding when to take a risk, and knowing that a bad decision was going to come back to punish you later. That's what made Hunt feel like Hunt. And I think that's the disconnect we're seeing today.
She's probably going to go get her friend.
The game still has the same setting, the same weapons, the same monster, and the same dark atmosphere. But some of the systems that created the feeling have gradually been stripped away or made less meaningful. And when that happens, you can have all the atmosphere in the world, but the game itself doesn't necessarily feel the same. So no, I don't think Hunt has a camping problem. I don't think Hunt has a spam problem. I don't even think Hunt has a burn problem or the meta problem. I think Hunt has an incentive and identity problem. The game is currently incentivizing players to play in a way that people find frustrating. And until those incentives change, we're just going to keep treating the symptoms. You nerf one weapon, players are going to find another. You change one consume, players find another. You nerf burn, players are going to find another way to secure the down. You change the meta, players are going to find the next strongest loadout. That's why I don't think the answer is simply just another round of nerfs. But the underlying system itself needs another look. We need to make bounty valuable again. Put a reasonable limit on consume stacking. Make burning a down hunter require more commitment. Give Quartermaster a purpose again. Most importantly, make aggressive, objective-focused play worth taking the risk for. Because at the end of the day, Hunt is at its best when two teams are fighting over something they both desperately want. That's the Hunt that I fell in love with. That's the Hunt I'm betting most of you fell in love with. That's when Hunt becomes exciting. That's when decisions matter. When taking the bounty actually means something. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think Hunt is currently in one of its better states?
I didn't.
Do you think Crytek had some genuinely good ideas, but their execution needs a little more work? Let me know. Thank you again for watching to the end. And as always, stay hydrated and stay awesome. Much love.
Watch me as I take off. I'll be working until I have all of my days off. Then I'm surfing in California when